watching the Bulldog Brewhouse podcast.
Hey everybody, it's Steve Grover. It's just a couple days before Easter and the long weekend. Looking forward to a little break, about 4 days. Hopefully I won't haul my butt back into the office during that 4-day holiday, but I'll do my best. But, we're back here for another episode of the Bulldog Brewhouse podcast. And, this is a special one for me. This is a good lawyer, very good lawyer out of Ontario. I've known him for almost 20 years now, I think, Adam. And so it's Adam Little from Oatly Vigbon, Ontario's personal injury law firm. Is that how you guys express yourself now?
Yeah, if we want to say it the long way.
Okay.
Or we might just call it OV law is how often people refer to us.
Okay, OV like Ovechkin?
Yeah.
Even though he broke Gretzky's goal record, I find that kind of ironic of, the Russian and Ukrainian wars on, and now you have a Russian we're all celebrating, that has the goal record of the NHL, and it's known that he's a good friend of Putin too. So it's a little ironic, if you keep it attached with politics and sports, which I do. But I met him one time in Calgary. I don't know if you know that.
Oh no, I've heard he's a decent enough guy in person. Like I agree with you about his politics, and largely for that reason, I was kind of hoping he wouldn't break that record, but he did it.
Well, if it was me, I probably would have just stepped down and said, you know what, let the great one have the record and show him respect, and then just retire, sort of, or just get assists for the rest of my career. Always pass on the goal. If you're my teammate, you'd probably be getting all the goals for the last of my career because I get just assists. But that's here and anywhere. Yeah, but you're a well-known lawyer in Ontario. You do a lot of personal injury law. And obviously, you and I have worked as co-counsel in a lot of files. And I still remember the first file we had with you. That's probably 15 plus years. And I remember that lady, and I don't know if you remember that. And I flew out for the
do.
Yeah. And then I flew out through the mediation. And it was some kind of weird place for the mediation. I had to haul my bags all through the train station to get back to the main downtown area. And I was staying by the Sky Dome at I think it was the Renaissance Inn there. I was staying there.
The one right in the dome?
No, I can't afford that one like you, buddy.
Oh.
I think it was.
I've never stayed there.
Yeah, it was right.
I heard it's awesome.
Yeah, it was right. It's right there, sort of the Sky Dome, and then the interesting. What I also remember about that first mediation, that was the Toronto Film Festival week, and I was walking to the mediation to go meet you and meet the client. I won't mention her name, but she's a very pleasant lady. And I was walking by the Ritz-Carlton, and there's a whole stash of paparazzi because George Clooney was staying there. And I looked at the rates, and I figured out for $50 more, I could have stayed at the Ritz-Carlton that weekend.
So. And you would have got to hobnob.
Yeah. Well, maybe I would have had George Clooney doing an ad for Grover Law. You never know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Goodwill Loring or something like that, or Ocean Law. But how you been since, obviously there's been a lot of stuff. There's been COVID. Now we've had Trudeau step down. We got a big election coming up on the 28th. And how you been so far?
I've been good. As I was telling you just before we got started, I'm busy on the home front these days with a little 6-month-old son.
Yeah.
So having a lot of fun with him.
Yeah.
But also continuing to work really hard and keep the practice moving along.
Well, yeah. Well, congratulations on having a 6-month-old son. That's going to keep you busy, but there's also the joy of that. And so I know who you are. Can you tell us a little background to my viewers of who Adam Little is? Where are you from originally? Where did you went to law school? And, why did you end up slugging through this career for so many years? You know what I'm saying?
I do, yeah. I'm an Ontario boy.
Okay.
I was born in Toronto and grew up just north of Toronto in the town of Newmarket, and lived there right until I went to law school at Queen's University in Kingston. It's funny because I was thinking back, like, why did I become a lawyer? Why did I want to be a lawyer so badly when I was a kid? And because from the time I was like 6 years old, if you said to me, what do you want to do with your life, Adam? What are you going to be when you grow up? I said lawyer. And I remembered it was when I was really young, my mother said to me, you argue with me so much, you should become a lawyer. And it turned out she was right.
Yeah.
So, then in my younger years, I really only thought that lawyers did criminal law. And I don't know if this is the same for everybody, but I never knew anything about civil litigation. I didn't know that there were all of these other areas of law. I didn't even realize that, there was these giant office towers in Toronto and in New York City and in Calgary and Edmonton, full of lawyers drafting documents and agreements and all of this. I knew Eddie Greenspan.
Yeah.
And he was the guy who I wanted to be like. So I went to law school. I focused heavily on criminal law. And then when I worked at the prisons in Kingston, so I was part of something called the Queen's Correctional Law Project.
Okay.
And the Correctional Law Project is like students going to the prisons that represent inmates at disciplinary hearings and parole hearings, all those sorts of things. It was fascinating, but I learned really quickly that I wanted nothing to do with criminal law.
And why is that?
It is a really tough go. You got a place like Kingston Penitentiary,
Okay.
which is long closed now, but every single person I met in that institution had just a really tough life from day one. And then you find out that it's largely legal aid that is funding criminal litigation. Back at the time, legal aid was paying, I think, $72 an hour. And it just, I realized that gig is not for me. This is back in the late 90s.
Yeah.
And an articling student at a criminal law firm had to have a pager on them, 24/7.
Oh yeah.
And if a client was arrested, detained, wanted their right to counsel, that pager would go off at 1 a.m, and it was the articling student who went off to the jailhouse to meet with the client. So when I looked at all of that, I thought, I think there's something else for me.
Yeah. Okay.
And wound up on Bay Street
Yeah.
at a big litigation boutique called Learners. And I started doing work for the Canadian Medical Protective Association, the CMPA.
Yeah.
They're the organization that defends claims against doctors all across Canada. And I really liked it. It was an area of the law that I had never sort of thought about before, is the medical side of things. And it got me interested in personal injury litigation and in medical malpractice litigation. I stayed there for about 5 years before I moved to Oatley Vigmond.
Yeah.
I'd heard of the firm. I'd heard of Roger Oatley and Jim Vigmond as being kind of the Ontario leaders in trial and jury trial advocacy. Roger had written the book addressing the jury.
Yeah.
And I sent an email. And that was in 2005, and the rest is history.
Okay.
I've been
Yeah.
and ever since.
Well, and so I remember this is going back to like 2002 or so, or 2003, just before they changed the law here in Alberta, where we had like a full tort system, and then we went to a cap. I can't even remember, was it Bill 50 or 52? That's how long ago it was. And I remember Jim flew out and he gave a talk about the regs and the deductible system in Ontario. And I remember him telling us that, I remember it was the Palliser Hotel downtown at the Crystal Ballroom upstairs. I still remember him walking around and talking to us. And then these regs are terrible. The caps, this is worse than Ontario. But he gave us a lot of good ideas to litigate the cases in Alberta, taking the case law. And then I think I had this Ontario case come across my desk, and I didn't know what the hell to do with it, and I don't want to get licensed in Ontario. So I remember I reached out to Jim, and he passed your name off to me, and sort of, I mean, that's how we got introduced, which is very interesting, through Jim. I don't know if you know the history of it. Yeah.
I did know that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So is he still practicing, or Jim, or is he retired now?
He's still practicing.
Okay. Okay.
So he's now he takes a little bit more time to travel, that sort of thing. He's in Dominica right now.
Yeah.
But no, he's still going strong.
And then is Roger still around, and did he retire?
Roger retired about 7 years ago.
Yeah, and I have that address in the jury book. I read it. It's a very good book, and I remember a lot of judges were commenting about what a great book this was, and they're using that almost like a little treatise for them to follow on jury trials and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, I've got to make a shameless plug, Steve.
Yeah.
There's a third edition that just came out last month.
Okay.
It's co-authored now by Roger and my partner Troy Lehman.
Okay.
And it's updated. It's phenomenal. You got to read it.
So I'll have to pick it up and read that one too. I just added more books to my library here at Grover Law. So
that's right.
So you tried criminal law. I know you're a student, and you got that, like, I want to be a criminal lawyer and Greenspan and all that stuff, and probably do justice for the downtrodden's in prison, and didn't really, cut you as your apple pie. Then you go to Bay Street, you work for the big firm, and I knew about CMPA and I knew about MedMal because, unfortunately, my dad was a doctor. And you know what?
Right.
It's always coming up. Bennett Jones at the time when I was growing up had all the files here, and there's fine lawyers we dealt with. Like my dad dealt with Dan Gallagher. I don't know if that name ever came across your desk, but he's now retired. So I knew all about the CMPA, and I learned right away, early, even young age, that they fight like bears till the end. Right? They don't just give up, eh?
They're a really unique organization in that they're not an insurance company, right?
Yeah.
Like if your dad was a surgeon in Arizona or something, he'd be insured by by State Farm or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
But here in Canada, we have this going way back to like 1912 or something, this Canadian Medical Protective Association, whose mandate is not to make money and increase shareholder value. Their mandate is just to protect the integrity of the medical profession.
Okay.
And from their perspective, the only way they can do that is by not paying claims.
Yeah.
I don't want you to think they don't ever pay claims. Of course they do. But they only pay claims when they determine that the doctor's care is indefensible.
Mm-hmm.
They can't defend the doctor on standard of care, and they can't defend them on causation, and they can't defend them on damages. Those are the cases that they settle.
So I don't know if this is true or not, but I've heard this rumor they have about like $3.2 billion just to pay their lawyers. Is that true? Like they've got a big reserve fund. I don't know if that's a number that's really true or something.
I know that the last I heard, it was closer to $7 billion.
Okay,
were
maybe
their assets.
My math's off like Trump. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I think they probably own half of the apartment buildings in Ottawa.
Okay.
But they are definitely, they are well funded.
Yeah.
They hire the best lawyers in the country,
mm-hmm.
and they fight tooth and nail when they can.
Yeah.
But the reality is it's all about case selection, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And careful case selection. And,
yeah.
Out of every 100 people that contact me for a medical malpractice case, I probably meet with 2 of them, and I probably take on 1 of them.
Yeah.
Because the reality is we live in Canada. It's a phenomenal country, and we have a really good healthcare system, but it's not perfect.
Yeah.
And medicine isn't perfect, right?
Mm-hmm.
Often, like your dad would have been doing surgery on someone because they needed it, because they had a problem that had to be fixed.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you're starting with a patient who has a problem and try to help them out. Things go wrong. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's a lawsuit there.
No.
And a lot of people take, a bad result, and they think, well, I'm going to sue that doctor.
Yeah.
The reality is that's not how you prove a malpractice case, right? You got to prove
Yeah.
that they breach a standard of care. They did something that doctors shouldn't do. And
Yeah.
it's just really tough.
Yeah.
And you know that you can't take any shortcuts.
Yeah, well, I remember when I was articling, then I sort of learned from my dad. It's like, and then analyzing as a junior lawyer, I found a lot of lawyers sometimes just go right to damages. Like, okay, this person is paralyzed, and you know what? Let's sue the neurosurgeon, but they forget to go, duty, breach, causation, damages. They forget about standard of care, and did that breach of standard of care cause the injury? Would you agree with that? Sometimes lawyers like you should get an expert right away in a med mal. I mean, isn't that the key pretty much?
I basically don't ever start malpractice litigation without expert support in the background.
Yeah.
So, because how would I know? I'll use your example, right? Somebody's paralyzed from a neurosurgery case, and I settled a case just like that last year.
Okay.
The guy was in a car accident.
Yeah.
He fractures some lumbar vertebrae.
Mm-hmm.
The neurosurgeon goes in to help the person to try to fix the problem, but instead puts 2 screws right through the spinal cord.
Yeah.
Now, I got an expert long before I started the litigation.
Mm-hmm.
The expert told me what the problem was, what the negligence was,
Mm-hmm.
and we went from there.
Yeah.
But you can't just assume because somebody comes out of surgery with a problem,
Mm-hmm.
you can't just assume it's negligence. And so the people you're talking about who take a damages first approach, they're usually the ones who don't know a lot about malpractice litigation in Canada.
Yeah.
They don't understand that they don't understand that the damages can be $20 million.
Yeah.
But if you don't have a rock solid case on standard of care and on causation,
Mm-hmm.
they won't pay you 1 penny
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
to resolve the case.
Oh, I know that. Yeah. And I mean, the thing is, I mean, and so I give the CMP a lot of credit. They've created this aura where they're so hard to deal with. Like a lot of lawyers sometimes they just steer away from med mal totally. Wouldn't you agree with that?
It's not for inexperienced counsel.
No.
You got to know the system inside out. You have to be able to take on the risk, right?
Yeah.
Like, by the time I finish a medical malpractice trial, I might have $300,000 in disbursements,
Mm-hmm.
and if I lose that case, they're all gone.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
And there's no after the event insurance that covers medical malpractice cases.
No, they won't
So-
touch that at all. I know that. Yeah.
No, and sometimes they'll say, well, we'll give you a quote, and the premium is so high
Mm-hmm.
that no one would pay it.
Yeah.
So you don't want to put those kinds of disbursements, that kind of money at risk unless you know what you're doing and unless you have a rock solid case.
Exactly. And you just can't have a laissez-faire in dealing med mal. You got to be all in, correct? Sort of?
100%.
Yeah. And so obviously you work on Bay Street and you were there for, say, was it 5 years or so?
Yeah.
And then what was the appeal of you reaching out to Oatly Vigbon for a job? What you said that, they're well-known trial, jury, but, going from defense to plaintiff counsel, I mean, I've seen it before a lot. It doesn't happen a lot in Canada opposed to the U.S. I see more defense lawyers going to the plaintiff side because it's very lucrative in the U.S. if you get a real good, solid jury trial judgment, like $60 million. But what was the allure from you to make that? You're at a good firm, obviously downtown Bay Street, and then all of a sudden you jump into a plaintiff practice, which is very heavy disbursement oriented. You could lose. I mean, you're going to make your billables at learners no matter what, correct? And you can be on your way to partnership and have a good career. So what was the attraction to go to plaintiff?
Yeah, I mean, why did I go from Bay Street to Barrie, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I went from Bay Street to Barrie because I've always been a people person, and it's the same reason when I say, I wanted to do criminal law. I thought I wanted to do criminal law.
Yeah.
Because it's, as you said, I wanted to help the downtrodden.
Yeah.
When I realized that the criminal legal system was not the one for me,
Mm-hmm.
it came to how can I help people?
Yeah.
And I got a lot of satisfaction from working for the defense, from helping doctors.
Oh, yeah.
But I couldn't help but feel like I was on the wrong side of the fence,
Yeah.
and my heart was elsewhere. So I finished a 16-week trial on for a group of doctors for the CMPA, and I just kind of had an awakening.
Yeah.
And I realized, like, this was a great experience. And I was doing regular trial work at learners because the CMPA goes to trial a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So had all that experience under my belt, and I reached out to Roger and Jim and just told them that I think it's time for me to come to the right side.
Oh, okay.
And that's the way I've always kind of felt, is that I'm better off acting for the little person,
Yeah.
providing, helping somebody to change their life, make their life better after a terrible event, rather than trying to defend whether it's a doctor or a driver or whatever, and try to act in the interest of an insurance company.
Yeah.
It just doesn't have the same kind of feel to me.
So, I mean, I know doctors, and I know there's that old movie Malice. I don't know if you remember that movie with Alec Baldwin.
No,
But
I didn't see
sometimes
it.
doctors think they're God. Or were they good clients to deal with, or are they kind of like, um, you know, were they decent or were they just when the lawsuit happens, they need their lawyer. I remember my dad, like, I don't need a lawyer, and these guys are litigators, and then all of a sudden that complaint comes in, and all of a sudden, my dad's best friend is at the CMPA, the lawyer there to protect him.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's hard to paint with a broad brush, right?
Yeah.
Some of the doctors were just so relieved and so happy to meet you,
Yeah.
and so glad that somebody was there to look after them.
Yeah.
And others felt like you were a nuisance and just leave me alone. This is a ridiculous case. Why are you bothering me?
Yeah, exactly.
Like with anything else, like any other profession, you got a pretty broad spectrum of personalities.
Yeah. My dad was pretty personable, and he liked people. He was very studious. I mean, I remember he has tons of surgery books in his den, and I couldn't believe he read all these books growing up, but he did in medical school and his postgraduate studies in the UK. But I guess every doctor is a little different. The one thing I found with my dad is, like, he spent all his time educating and getting these postgraduate studies in surgery, and he really cared about his patients. I mean, you go into medicine because you want to help people, and when the lawsuit happened, like, he got a little offended because, I'm going out and putting my heart and soul in my medical practice, and he was the kind of guy to help his patients as much as he could, but it's almost like a little offensive. And I remember sometimes he never get depressed, but I know he's a little downtrodden with, like, this person's suing me, and there's nothing here, and so sometimes it was kind of like, you do your best to help your patients, and then sometimes, but mistakes do happen, and there are, we can all agree there's bad cases that come forward because lawyers don't know how to screen their files.
For sure.
Yeah.
And those are the ones that tended to have a more disgruntled doctor.
Yeah. Okay.
But I think at the end of the day, they were all pretty satisfied that the CMPA really goes to bat for them.
Mm-hmm.
They don't say, well, why don't we just pay this plaintiff $25,000 and they'll go away?
Yeah.
That never happens.
Okay. So, out of curiosity, this is going back to 1912. What's the history of CMPA? Why was there a push of the doctors putting the self-insured program together, unlike in the U.S., where I deal with a lot of friends in Ohio and Michigan, and they sue doctors or hospitals, and there are settlements that come without even pushing it to mediation.
Yeah, my recollection is that it was a group of doctors who came together and formed this kind of collective, and it's still, to this day, it's run by physicians. When you call the CMPA and you tell them about something that's going on in your practice, whether it's a college complaint or a lawsuit that you've received, or whatever, you speak with a doctor, and they've got a whole team of them. And I think the idea was, 110 or so years ago, they were looking at the way things were going in the world,
Yeah.
and the way things, especially south of the border.
Yeah.
And so we don't want that to happen here. We want to protect our reputations. We want to protect the integrity of the profession. We don't want to pay claims that are spurious or even that are defensible.
Yeah.
We want to have a strong front,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll hire the best, and
Yeah.
we'll spare no expense
Mm-hmm.
if it means that the integrity of our profession is protected.
Yeah, and I mean, medicine's a great profession, and obviously, there are the top professions, law, accounting, and dentistry. And so they have to keep the integrity they're going to. Like, we have malpractice insurance too as lawyers, and I know
Of course,
in Alberta they'll fight them pretty hard. I mean, and that's due so because they want to protect the reputation of the law society or the lawyer rather than just paying on frivolous claims. The same idea, wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, and I don't know if it's the same in Alberta, but for physicians here in Ontario who have hospital privileges,
Mm-hmm.
you have to renew those every year, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to apply, and then the hospital board decides whether or not they're going to renew your privileges. If a payment is made in Ontario, if a payment is made on your behalf, to either to settle a lawsuit or as a result of a judgment,
Yeah.
you got to report that.
Mm-hmm.
You have to report it to the hospital. And doctors, for obvious reasons, they don't want to do that when they didn't make a mistake, right?
Yeah.
Because it becomes a black mark on their record.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, but we're
So,
at the end of the day, we're not all perfect. I mean, I know, someone goes and, they go to Cambridge and they have a medical degree and then they do all this postgraduate studies and like we're still human. I think 99% of accidents that happen in like even car accidents are probably human error. Wouldn't you agree with that? We can't be perfect in everything we do in life.
100%. These days, though, I don't know if it's the same for you. I'll bet it is, though. The number of accidents where I suspect the defendant driver is on their phone is just, it's incredible. And I drive down, I live in Barrie, and so we have the Highway 400 goes right through town. It's a very busy freeway. And when I'm driving to Toronto, every second car, the driver is just staring at their phone.
I mean,
so that's an avoidable mistake, and it's those avoidable mistakes that kind of bother me a little bit.
Yeah.
But I made a promise to my kids years ago that I will not use my phone when I'm driving the car.
Yeah.
And I've always kept that promise.
I mean, it's easier than said by done. I mean, I remember growing up, there was no cell phones. When I was in law school, there was no cell phones.
Yeah.
And sometimes I look back at it, it's like, I think life was easier. Just get a cord and go get the payphone and call mom or something like that. Or, there is the accessibility. I mean, it's almost like, I'm sorry to say, it's almost like an addiction with your iPhone or Samsung that you have now. You see it, you got to touch it. Oh, did someone email me? Did someone, like, I got to check my Google, like, I got to check this Google review of this restaurant I'm going with my wife on Saturday. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of people are attached to their phones no matter what. You have to agree with that.
Do you have teenagers?
No, I've got a young one. Yeah, she's 3 years
Okay.
old, but she goes crazy about the phone. Yeah, I know all about
for sure.
that.
My
Yeah.
6-month-old loves the screen.
Yeah.
But I've got an 18-year-old and a 16-year-old.
Yeah.
And they spend every waking moment that is not occupied with something on their phones.
Yeah.
And it's not, it's not unusual. That's what all of their friends do.
Yeah.
And when you think about it, you've got endless entertainment,
Yeah.
endless connectivity with virtually everyone you know,
Mm-hmm.
and the entire, like the sum of all known facts in our universe
Yeah.
available to you
Mm-hmm.
with a few taps of a key. No wonder people are addicted.
I know. Well, it's just like it's interesting. You talk. My daughter, she's going to be 4 in June, and I think this was before Christmas. She's crying about the phone, and I hid the phone in my coat jacket, and then I bent down to tie my shoes. She went behind me, all the way behind, and I felt my phone slip out of the back because she was just so, it's almost like an addiction, like almost like, I just need that phone, and Daddy bent over, so I'm going to slip behind him and pick out his phone and start playing with it. I mean, the kids are very addicted to phones. Everyone's addicted to the phone. And, I sometimes think like, okay, one day when I leave the practice of law, I can get rid of my phone. And maybe, have you ever thought of that? Like how peaceful it would be without having a phone? Or would you, even if you're retired and just having coffee and walking around, maybe go to a Blue Jays game and hang out with you. I don't know if you have any more friends because, to retire is to expire. I mean, a lot of people I know that retire have no friends anymore. But have you thought of the day of where you don't have a phone? Would it be peaceful, or would you actually go back to the addiction and run into Rogers and buy another phone?
That's a hard question. I got to tell you, like, if I even momentarily misplace my phone, I start to freak out. Right? What do I do with it? It's in my pocket, right?
Yeah.
And it's funny because, that's after hours, whatever. But we've all become so reliant on it for everything. Like, I want to know where my kids are. I got to look on Find Friends. Why didn't somebody text me back? I got to figure that out.
Yeah.
It's things that, like you say, when we were young, there was no cell phones.
No.
And people didn't worry.
Yeah.
If your buddy was taking a road trip, he took the road trip, and you heard about it when he got back.
Yeah, exactly.
They didn't have to check in with everybody all the time.
Oh, I know. And and you got so many apps on your phone. Like, I'm bored, so I'm gonna go to Expedia.ca and say, like, is there a flight to Kelowna this weekend? I'm not really gonna go, but check
maybe
it
though.
Maybe. And then you close your phone. But I remember I went to law school in Texas, and I used to go through New Mexico, and I stopped in Albuquerque, and I was going east, New Mexico into Texas, and halfway through New Mexico, my tire blows out. Boom. Okay? Imagine it's 7 o'clock in New Mexico, the sun is setting, you're in the desert, and you have no phone. And I thought, okay, like, the coyotes are going to get me. And then luckily these gentlemen came up and they said, hey, buddy, you want to ride? And I looked around like, I got no alternative. They could have killed me. You never know. But they're the nicest guys. They took me to the gas station nearby, which is 5 miles away. And the guy looked at me that owned the gas station. Okay, I'm going to charge you a lot of money, buddy, because you got nowhere to go. So I paid $500 US for a tire back in like
a bald tire.
Yeah, it was No, it was a good tire. I'll give it to him. Yeah, I think it was 96, 97. Yeah, I think it was 96. And you got nowhere to go, dude. 500 US. So I whipped out my credit card my parents gave. He drove me back, put the tire, and I went. But look, imagine that time where you don't have a cell phone and you're stuck in the desert in New Mexico at 7 o'clock at night and the sun's coming down. And I don't know if you know, the desert is like when it gets evening, it's cold. It
is, yeah.
And there's rattlesnakes around. There's coyotes. You never know who's going to come out of nowhere. But it was just a very interesting scenario where if I had my phone, I'd like call AAA right away and someone would come. It was just lucky these guys came across me. But just different time and different generation, eh?
Yeah, but for guys our age, I mean, we all had those, maybe not in the desert.
Yeah.
But, those similar experiences where wouldn't it have been nice to have a phone?
Yeah.
But we all made it through okay.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And I do miss the payphone. Like, I don't know where Superman would change now. You ever thought of that?
Yeah.
Like, I haven't seen a payphone. I think maybe he'd have to move to London. Yeah, I think they still have those red, telephone booths.
Doctor Who.
Yeah. Did you ever thought of it? If Superman moved to Toronto, where's the payphones for him to change? You know what I'm saying?
No, he's got to use a public washroom.
Exactly. But I don't know if I go into public washroom anyways,
No.
The crowd hanging out there. So obviously you do med-mal as a plaintiff lawyer now. You do other areas like car accidents, premises liability claims, stuff like that too, right?
Yeah, everything in terms of, what you consider to be a classic personal injury sort of law practice, right? The car accidents car accidents and motorcycle accidents and truck accidents
Yeah.
and all of those sorts of things. All the what we call occupiers liability in
Yeah.
Ontario. So, you know, slips and falls and trips and falls
Yeah.
and other bad things that happen. Long-term disability insurance
Yeah.
claims,
Yeah.
and medical malpractice. I that's kind of my area of specialty,
Yeah.
but I keep it sort of on the smaller side in terms of the number of files, because they take a lot of time and effort,
Hmm.
and a lot of risk.
Okay. And of all the areas you practice as a plaintiff lawyer, is it med mal? Like, if you had to choose one area, like, unfortunately, right now there is Bill 47 here in Alberta. I don't know if you heard about it. It's
Yeah,
gone.
tort reform.
Yeah, it's gone through its first reading, and you know, it's asking for full tort reform where you can't sue for personal injuries on the general damages. But if you know, you do have the deductible system there in Ontario where it just keeps auto alive. But if you had to wake up one morning and say, you know what, I'm going to get rid of all my clients and I'm going to pick one area, plaintiff work, where would you focus on?
It would be medical malpractice.
Yeah. Okay. And why is
Yeah.
that? Just the challenge of doing it?
Yeah, and you know, you talk about tort reform. We've had tort reform in Ontario in various iterations for more than 30 years now
Yeah.
in the auto insurance regime, and it is just a gong show
Yeah.
from start to finish. I mean, this like tort reform doesn't work,
Yeah.
and Ontario is a classic example of why it doesn't work.
Hmm.
Like, I heard that in Alberta they're looking at what they want to move to like a care first system,
Oh, yeah.
whatever that means. Obviously, more of a no fault system.
Yeah.
And they say, well, we're going to reduce your premiums by like $400 a year. It was the number that I read.
Yep.
So in Ontario, in 1990, the Liberals introduced something called the Ontario Motorist Protection Plan, or the OMPP.
Hmm.
And that was where we first got our threshold.
Yeah.
So the insurance industry's attempt to eliminate all the whiplash claims from the system, all the smaller claims. So if you don't have a permanent and serious impairment, you can't sue for pain and suffering.
Hmm.
And that lasted for about 4 years. Then in Ontario, we had the NDP for a short period of time in the 90s under Bob Ray. And he had campaigned on eliminating public auto, just going to a public system, like government auto
Yeah,
insurance,
like
like they had in
ICB,
BC and Manitoba.
Yeah, in Saskatchewan, yeah.
Yeah, but I guess after he got elected, like literally thousands and thousands of insurance workers marched on Queen's Park.
Oh, yeah.
That's Ontario's legislature.
Yeah.
And so he scaled it back a bit and introduced what we called Bill 164. So that was like this huge no-fault system. You couldn't sue for anything but pain and suffering, but there were all kinds of no-fault benefits that were really quite rich, like you know, $1,000 a week for income replacement, $1 million for med rehab insurance, $10,000 a month for attendant care, indexed to inflation with no lifetime limit, housekeeping benefits, all these sorts of things. And it only lasted 22 months because it was just too much. So then the Conservatives come along under Mike Harris and they implement something called Bill 59. And it's basically, that happened in 1996. And it's essentially the same system that we still have almost 30 years later. They constantly tinker with it.
Yeah.
But, you know, we've got these huge deductibles.
Yeah.
So there's the verbal threshold. You got to have a permanent and serious impairment. And then if you get over that threshold hurdle, the current deductible in Ontario for pain and suffering is almost $47,000. So, so all of the small claims, the smaller claims, are completely gone.
Yeah.
And like that was their goal. You'd
Yeah.
think that they'd save money, but instead, Ontario is the most expensive province in the country for auto insurance. It's second. Alberta's number 2. Ontario's number 1.
Yeah.
So if Alberta wants to go down the Ontario road
Yeah.
and try this tort reform system, I suspect that instead of paying $400 less, you're going to be paying $400 more before you know it.
Yeah.
It's just an abject disaster here.
Okay.
When Mike Harris's government set up their income replacement benefit limit in 1996 was set at $400 a week.
Mm-hmm.
It's still $400 a week in 2025.
Yeah.
That's the maximum.
Yeah.
Like who can pay their mortgage on $400 a week in income replacement?
Yeah. And that's your
Never.
Section B benefits, right? Yeah.
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 So never mind putting food on the table
Yeah.
or dressing your kids. It's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
And yet we pay more than anybody else. Like I just got my insurance renewal last week.
Mm-hmm.
I drive a 5-year-old Tesla Model 3. It's nothing to write home about.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost $4,000 a year to insure that car.
Oh, that's crazy.
And I don't live in Toronto. Like
Yeah.
and it's auto theft in the GTA is insanity.
Oh yeah, I know that.
Insanity.
Yeah.
But not for Teslas. You can't steal them. They're computers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't understand why the system, why anyone would ever want to follow in the footsteps of Ontario.
Well,
It's a bad system.
So my viewers understand how it works in Ontario. So if your claim is worth $50,000, would they knock out $46,000? So you're left with
Yes.
$4,000 maybe. That's it.
So nobody, nobody's going to pursue
Yeah.
a claim for $4,000.
Yeah.
It's not worth it.
Okay.
So they eliminated essentially all those small claims from the system. And then even if, like, let's say somebody came in with a claim that was worth $60,000,
Yeah.
I'm still not going to take it
Yeah.
because the deductible is going to eat up 90% of that.
Okay.
Now, the only saving grace is for bigger files. If you get over 155,000,
Okay.
the deductible vanishes.
So is that the whole settlement? Like that includes pain and suffering, special damages, loss of income, all that stuff, or just generals?
Just generals.
Oh, so you got to get $155,000 in generals to wipe out the deductible.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's why so you got to have a really solid case, and then hopefully you get that 155 or plus, and then the deductible's gone.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. What happens if your claim is $200,000 for all your claims together, like specials, loss of income, earning capacity, and generals? Do they knock out the 46,000 or 47,000?
Yeah, and the deductible only applies to pain and suffering or general
Mhm.
damages.
Okay.
So if your general damages was 100, you
Yeah.
get 53.
Okay, but then you have all the other heads of damages like net pass. Do you have net pass loss of income there, net or gross?
70%
Yeah.
is the limitation on past loss of income.
Yeah.
No limitation on future.
Okay, and then there's housekeeping claims. You still have that in Ontario,
Yeah, in
And-
tort only.
and future cost of care claims.
Yes.
Okay, so the big thing in Ontario, if you're practicing auto, you're looking for they call them the CAT files. Is that the acronym they use, the catastrophic files? That's what I've heard from people in Ontario. I'm looking for the CAT, and I thought, what do you mean you're looking for the CAT? Like, who the hell? like the Cat Stevens maybe, or Cat in the Hat? No, they're looking for those big files, eh?
It's funny because you become so used to this weird nickname that we've come up for it that you forget that most people don't know what the hell you're talking about. You say, "Oh yeah, I got this cat file." What? Against a veterinarian? No, but it's so catastrophic impairment is a defined phrase in our statutory accident benefits schedule, or no fault benefits. So if you meet the test of catastrophic impairment, you get $1 million in med rehab and attendant care over the course of your life.
Wow.
Instead of the significantly reduced numbers if you're not catastrophic impaired. Plus, you get housekeeping and home maintenance through your no faults if you're cat.
So now that I know the acronym, I was at the spring conference last year for OTLA. It was a pretty good conference. So I can walk around and say I'm the cat lawyer for Canada, Alberta, eh? And everybody will like,
That's
okay,
right.
he's a big shot. Cat in the Hat. All right.
That's right.
Okay.
So the acronym, the acronym that's good is CAT.
Mm-hmm.
The acronym that's bad is MIG,
And what does MIG stand for?
the Minor Injury Guideline.
Okay, all right.
And so the Minor Injury Guideline is, I'd say, 90% of cases in Ontario, 90% of accidents in Ontario.
Okay.
You have a strain or a sprain, no
Yeah.
fracture,
Whiplash,
that sort of thing.
WAD 1,
Yeah.
WAD 2, yeah, okay.
Exactly.
Okay,
You're limited to $3,500 for med and rehab treatments.
okay.
And so, it does, what does $3,500 get you these days in terms of OT or, massage therapy, physio, whatever?
Yeah,
It doesn't work.
okay.
So where CAT is the highest tier,
Mm-hmm.
MIG is the lowest.
So I don't want to have a MIG fall unless I have a MIG fighter in my hangar out at the Springbank Airport in Calgary, right?
Yeah, well, the reality is, though, I don't know about you, but we get a lot of mild TBI cases, post-concussion
Oh
syndrome,
yeah.
where, somebody's been in what objectively looks like a fairly minor accident. Usually it's a rear end.
Mm-hmm.
And, they think they're going to be fine. They go to some treatment. They're in the minor injury guideline.
Yeah.
Then they try to go back to work.
Yeah.
And they last like 10 minutes. They can't look at the computer screen. They get distracted. They've got tinnitus, that like all of the usual symptoms.
They got to
And
wear
so
those
then it becomes-
blue glasses, Yeah.
Yeah, and they've got vision problems.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the cases where then we wind up in a big fight with the no-fault insurer
Okay.
to get them out of the MIG.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So the goal being from MIG to CAT, right?
Yeah. Okay. And it's kind of interesting now how you have the CDC standards for brain injuries, and everyone always says you need a loss of consciousness for a brain injury. Well, you probably know was his name Phineas Gage, the guy that had the nails.
Railroad thing
right.
through his head.
Yeah, he never lost consciousness, but he was a changed man after that. He was completely nuts. And so it's interesting now, like dazed and confused. You ask clients like that, were you dazed and confused after the accident? Is that can that be a concussion, MTBI, mild traumatic brain injury? I mean, there's all this, I guess it's a benefit to us as lawyers, all the studies coming out of the NFL now of, concussions and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that I think in about 10 or 15 years, they'll develop a form of imaging that will show us the microscopic changes that happen after a concussion.
Yeah.
Like all of the neurologists who specialize in that area, they know that those changes are there.
Oh yeah.
We haven't developed a system yet that will show us something on a screen so we can see concussion.
Well, there's
but we know it's there.
Oh yeah.
And we know it's a cumulative effect too, right?
Oh,
so just like the NFL guys are the greatest example of that.
Mm-hmm.
With every concussion you have, it's going to be that much worse than the last one.
Oh yeah. Well, you look like someone like Junior Seau. All of a sudden, he takes a gun to his chest and kills himself. Like, I remember him growing up and playing at USC and University of Southern California, being that crazy linebacker and living in, playing for the Chargers. And he looked, and all of a sudden, and then you take his brain, and I guess they studied it, and there's all these, problems, lesions, and stuff like that. So obviously there's unfortunately there's some good stuff that's come out of the NFL, or even the NHL, but I think we're leaps and years beyond any kind of real imaging to figure out if someone really has a TBI, a traumatic brain injury, eh?
Yeah, we're not even close yet. Apparently, yeah. I mean, I don't know if you do SPECT scans.
Not in Calgary.
Alberta.
No.
Okay. So I've done them on a few files, and I had a case that went to trial 2 or 3 years ago where the SPECT scan was an issue.
Mm-hmm.
They're really good in terms of their ability to show perfusion damage, like blood flow being restricted, that sort of thing. The problem that you generally have is Other conditions can cause those problems outside of concussion. So if
Yeah.
you've got somebody with like severe depression,
Yeah.
which often happens in these cases, right? Because
Yeah.
they're not able to pay the bills anymore. They can't go to work anymore. They can't feel normal anymore. They're never
Mhm.
pain free. So they
Mhm.
develop depression. Well, depression can also show up that way on a SPECT scan.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but they can be a good resource if you've got a plaintiff who has been diagnosed with a concussion by medical doctor, by the ER, maybe their family doctor, and you're looking to get confirmation of that diagnosis,
Mhm.
then I don't know. I've had some great results with SPECT scans.
Yeah, I know there's MRIs and there's fMRIs, functional MRIs,
Yeah.
and there's PET scan and SPECT scan. And I remember diffuse tensor imaging, Eric Bigler. Do you remember? Does that name ring a bell with you? The guy at BYU, Brigham Young University. What's
Yeah,
ever
that-
happened with DTI? Because I was part of that brain injury group at the American Association for Justice. I got off their list service because it's the same thing over and over again. Because they're always talking about Dauber and all that stuff and that the junk science applications in the U.S. What's happened with DTI? Is it still out there?
So my recollection, that was at least 15 years ago.
Yeah,
that
yeah.
It was kind of coming up, right? And
Yeah.
I thought, oh, because when you looked at the images, like they were pretty impressive.
Yeah, yeah,
My recollection though is they didn't pass that Daubert test.
yeah, yeah,
And then once that precedent was set,
yeah.
it was junk science, and that's it.
And so Eric's, I haven't heard his name in maybe 10 years now. Eric, Bigler. Yeah, I've seen him
Yeah,
present.
I remember.
Yeah, he's pretty confident in his stuff, though. I remember that, you know. But it's interesting. What the dynamics we go through as plaintiff lawyer. Say of all the areas, like there's so much out there that, like a lot of people think auto for personal injury. Would you agree with that? Okay.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
But if tort reform, we hope that maybe they carve out something for us, for these victims of car accidents here in Alberta. But what's a hot area that you would look at for non-MVA kind of coming up? I mean, everyone talks about sexual assault. I know that's terrible to happen to someone. We got, occupiers liability claims. Obviously, we talked about med mal. There's dental malpractice. What's an area that you think is good for, like a lot of, even my own firm or a lot of the people in Alberta, if no fault comes down, it passes as of January 1st, 2027. There's no more auto accidents.
Yeah, I think that the natural kind of next big thing is mass torts.
Okay.
Class actions, and often those are about, unfortunately, things like sexual assault, but they can be about just about anything, right?
Yeah.
And they're really tough. My firm is just starting to get to see some of that. It's pretty specialized, and again, it can be really risky because you're dealing with huge numbers, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of investment. And I think that's why a lot of the firms who do mass torts, they don't do it alone.
No.
They will chain up together 3 or 4, mass tort firms.
Yeah.
And then they work together to try to resolve the case.
But then I've also heard the thing about even when they mass up, there's then, when there's a settlement, they all start arguing about the pumpkin pie. Like, I want 3/4 of it, and you want 1/4 of it, and Steve, you're gonna get a crumb and get out of here. I've heard
I want whipped cream on mine.
Yeah, there's a lot of politics. All of a sudden, you get like, what was the recent tobacco case that went on for 32 years or 30 years? The $32 billion settlement. I don't know if you guys were part of that at all, or you stayed away from that.
No.
Yeah.
No. We only have we've done a couple of small class actions in the past. Mm-hmm. We have one ongoing right now. Mm-hmm. Involving a nursing home in Barrie.
Yeah.
That didn't follow, or that's the allegation is they didn't follow COVID-19 protocols.
Yeah.
And a lot of residents died as a result.
Yeah, that's terrible.
And
yeah.
I don't generally handle nursing home liability, but it's another area, right?
Yeah.
Sadly, so sadly, I mean, if you know anybody who lives in a nursing home, you know what the conditions are like a
Oh
lot
yeah,
of the time, right?
yeah, yeah,
And I recognize that businesses need to make money, but it just seems to me like those nursing homes cut an awful lot of corners.
yeah. I know. And there's all that American Association Justice. I don't know if you're a member of AAJ, profit over people. And they
Yeah.
use that with the juries down in the U.S. and they move their emotion. All of a sudden, you get like an $80 million judgment. So much is punitives, and I mean, we don't have those kind of cases here in Canada at all. No.
Not even close, right?
No.
And we've got a cap, of course,
Yeah.
on pain and suffering damages,
Yeah.
and that prevents anything like that. And if you get $1 million for punitives in a case here, that's phenomenal.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
you go down. I hear about cases in Florida where the punitives are approaching $80 and $100 million.
Oh yeah. But then there's also the threat of appeal, and can we cut a deal, and do they have insurance, and do they go bankrupt, and do you want to collect their assets, and like I really don't want to sell a bunch of beds out of a nursing home to collect my judgment. I don't know if you want to have a garage sale.
No, and that's why I say maybe that area of law is not for me.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, we talked about you and your history. I want to talk about some fun because lawyers do have fun. Is there for fun? What do you do out there? I mean, I know you got a young family, but recreational activities, sports. What do you enjoy to do? Passing the time on a weekend, or you take time off and take 3 weeks off or so?
I'm a runner. I've been a runner for 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do a lot of training for long distance runs.
Okay.
In a week and a half, I've got a 25-kilometer trail race.
Okay.
It's through a really dense piece of forest not far from here,
Mm-hmm.
and up and down a bunch of ski hills. It's called Pick Your Poison.
Okay.
And I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be fun.
Okay.
In the last few years, I've become a big fan of Formula One racing.
Okay.
And I don't know if you're an F1 fan.
Like everyone else in the world. I mean, I'm
It's the drive to survive effect, right?
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
So I got hooked because of Drive to Survive, and my 18-year-old son is also a huge fan.
Yeah.
And so this will be our third year of going down to Montreal to watch the Grand Prix.
Mm-hmm.
That's something we love to do.
Yeah.
And I'm very much an outdoors person.
Yeah.
I love boating and off-roading
Mm-hmm.
and all that sort of thing. And I'm a lifelong, tragically hip fanatic.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I'm surrounded by memorabilia
Yeah.
right now.
Exactly.
And
Well, that's good.
I may or may not have a tattoo as well.
Okay. So yeah, and is your son into the Lego set for Formula One, the Speed Collection now?
Yeah, well, so am I.
Okay. How
I
far?
built-
How many? I think there's 8 of them right now. Isn't there something like that?
I think so. I built
Yeah.
2 years ago. I built the big McLaren
Yeah.
F1 Lego set. My son has built a bunch of the small ones. He's a Ferrari fan.
Okay.
I'm more of a Red Bull guy, but
Okay.
he's built all of the small Ferraris that he can find.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I've got the Ferrari one. I've got the Aston Martin. I got the BVT one I built. The McLaren one, that was
Nice.
kind of a struggle to put together. It didn't fit very well. So I put it in a corner somewhere. So it looks okay, but if you pick it up, it may just like
Don't pick it up. Yeah.
it'll just implode.
Don't let your 3-year-old anywhere near.
No, no, no.
right?
I hid it behind a popcorn machine in my man cave so no one can see it. But I got the Oracle one. I got that as a present. Almost 2 weeks ago, I turned, at my birthday, and one of the staff members gave me the Oracle one, which was a hard one to get. It was out at Lego Store. I don't know if you go to the Lego Store in the Southern Ontario area.
We've got a huge one at the Vaughan Mills Outlet Mall, and it's a really great store.
Yeah. Okay. And then at the end of the day, obviously, I'm going to tell you honestly, I hate running. Okay. So that's one thing you and I don't have in common. I never liked, I always despised the Terry Fox run. I know it's a great cause, But I hated doing that run, and you know, you remember doing that run. Do they still do the Terry Fox run for schools at all?
Yeah, absolutely. And
Okay.
in fact, this year is, I think, the 45th anniversary
Yeah.
of, if I remember correctly, of Terry Fox's Marathon of Hope.
Okay. Yeah.
And I know that they're planning to make it a bigger deal this year.
Okay.
And there's a great commercial out right now celebrating the anniversary, and it's got a tragically hit song in the background.
Okay.
So
Well, he's a great man.
Terry Fox,
Yeah.
yeah, he's a national hero.
Yeah. Yeah. I just didn't like the run.
No, well, that's the thing about running. You either love it or you hate it.
Yeah,
And even for
exactly.
me,
Yeah.
like I love running, but some days I hate it.
So what attracts, like, okay, for a non-runner like me, like today I went to the gym and I rode one of the bicycles, and I for like 30 minutes, and I burned some good calories. I got a sweat on. But what's the attraction of running? I'm trying to figure out, like just all of a sudden you're just going and you got all this energy going and you just focus. Is that what the attraction of running is all about?
I'm a very early morning runner.
Okay.
It's often dark when I'm out, and my brain kind of has a chance to just like push everything aside, and like if I'm in a trial or something, I come up with, this is going to sound crazy, but I come up with some of the best cross-examination questions when I'm out at 5 a.m. on a run.
Okay.
I'll pick something and kind of think about it, and it's almost like a meditation. And I hit the go switch, and off I go.
Okay, so for me to be a better cross examiner, I should start running at 5 in the morning. Is that what you're recommending?
It's not for everybody.
Okay, I may try it tomorrow morning. I'll let you know how it works. I'll text you. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Any plans for the summer coming up? I know we're coming up in Easter now, and you know summer's gonna be around the corner. Obviously, the May long weekend, Victoria Day. Any plans for your family to take some time off and go somewhere?
Yeah, I'm actually leaving with my wife and I and our 6-month-old on the Monday of the long weekend. We're heading to Victoria
Okay.
to spend the week on Vancouver Island. I've never been there before.
Yeah. Okay.
I love Vancouver.
Yeah.
My wife's business has an office in White Rock, just outside of Vancouver, so we'll pop in there. But I'm looking forward to seeing Tofino.
So that's in May you're going over there?
Yes.
Okay. We'll let you know.
And then
Go ahead.
I was going to say, and then in July we're looking at taking all the kids and heading to Japan.
Okay. And how long are you going to be in Japan for?
Probably 8 or 9 days. It's a long flight, so you got to make it worthwhile.
Oh yeah, yeah. Okay. I've been to Japan. I've been to Tokyo. Are you going to Tokyo?
We haven't really got a full plan in place yet, but I mean, I assume that's where we'll be flying
Okay.
to.
Yeah. Well, one of my bucket list things is I want to go to. I've been to Tokyo. We've been to Disneyland of Tokyo. It's okay. It's not the best one, but still, I still want to go to the harbor area first thing in the morning when the ships come off at 4 in the morning. They bring that fresh tuna off the ocean, and they have a. I think they've got a restaurant there or a chef, and he'll cut you fresh tuna first thing in the morning. Have breakfast there. I think that's still one of my bucket lists. So if you get to Tokyo, make sure you get the kids up at 4 in the morning to go down the harbor and get the fresh tuna sushi. Okay.
I want to ride the bullet train.
Yeah, I've done that. It's pretty cool. Yeah, I still like Disneyland better though. All right. Well, obviously, and then we're coming up to the playoffs. The playoffs start for hockey, NHL. Are you a Maple Leafs fan?
I think pretty much everybody in the GTA is just by association of living here. I'm not the biggest Leaf fan.
Yeah.
But I'm a bandwagon fan, and this is going to be an exciting series. It's a Battle of Ontario.
Yeah.
We're going to be playing the Senators.
Yeah.
And I look forward to being horribly let down.
Okay. Well, I mean, but the Flames didn't make the playoffs. They got eliminated last night. So at least your team's the Maple Leafs, but they haven't won the Cup since '67, eh? They tragically
Been
hit
a
on.
long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
And go
well,
ahead.
the Oilers are in though, right? Are you an Oilers fan as well,
No,
or no?
I was
Because
born
of
and
the
raised.
rivalry.
I was born and raised in Calgary. I mean, that my second favorite team is any team that plays the Oilers that night. Okay, don't let the people in Edmonton know that. I love Edmonton. I love West Edmonton, but and they got great restaurants up there. They've got a great Malaysian restaurant called Tropica. It's amazing. If you're up in Edmonton, try this Malay. I love Malaysian food, and it's just a great restaurant. It's called Tropica in Edmonton. It's awesome. Okay.
Sounds good.
Yeah, but like there's that old joke from the what is it 2000s? The Flames are like a bag of tea. They're good for one cup. So I live my life. We still have season tickets in my family. I tend to give them away, and I've lived the life of winning a cup during my generation, '89. So I still remember that day, and it'll be living in infamy if my kid ever sees it. I doubt it, but maybe that team will be in Sacramento when I passed on. It's hard.
Yeah,
It's hard
well,
to say with the Canadian teams what's going to happen in the long run.
it is, and I mean, well, here we are in the last night of the season,
Mm-hmm.
and the Canadians still haven't made the playoffs. If they get 1 point tonight, or if the Blue Jackets lose, then the Canadians will be playing the Capitals.
So are they putting
First
all their
round,
hope
so-
again in a Russian? Who's that superstar from St. Petersburg KHL? The kid, like they think he's the
The
next.
one, yeah, I can't remember his name, but I think they are.
So
Well, it's so big tonight that they moved the French language debate.
okay,
It started at 6 p.m. Eastern time
okay,
instead of it was scheduled for 8.
yeah.
But all of Quebec will be watching Les Habitants. So
And maybe this Russian will save though.
maybe.
But
We'll
he's
see.
he's pretty good. I saw him in warm-ups. The guy can skate. I forget his name. It's like Dinemov or something like that. Good looking guy. KHL, St. Petersburg. I've been to St. Petersburg also. I don't know if you've been to Russia. I know there's a lot, but
Never.
St. Petersburg is the Venice of the North. I've been to Venice. I've been to St. Petersburg. St. Petersburg is a great city. I know there's a lot
I've
of
heard that.
politics
Beautiful.
going on, but anytime you recommend going to St. Petersburg, hopefully this war will end and we can move on with life. And I love going to Europe, and I'd recommend going to St. Petersburg. Helsinki, I'd pass on it. Okay, that's my view of Helsinki.
Okay.
Other than going to Lapland all the way up to north to see Santa Claus, but otherwise, I really I hope the best for the Buds. Hopefully, they win the cup this year. We never know, but I appreciate you being on the podcast, and I know you're a very busy man. And I wish you all the best in your career going forward. We look forward to working with you as co-counsel in any Ontario cases. I always have a pleasure learning so much from you and Oatley Big Bond, and it's just a benefit to have you not only as a lawyer but also as a friend too. Okay.
Well, thank you, Steve. It was my pleasure.
Okay. Well, thank you, and hopefully go Leafs go. Eh.
Absolutely. Go Leafs, go.
All right. Well, take care, and I wish you all the best this Easter long weekend to you and your family. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And thanks for everyone for tuning in for another episode of the Bulldog Brewhouse podcast. I wish everyone a good night, and hopefully the Easter Bunny brings everyone lots of chocolate eggs this weekend. Take care. Bye-bye.